My name is Ryan Hornberg, and I have the privilege of being the director of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes Lacrosse Ministry. Since the inception of U.S. Lacrosse in 1998, FCA Lacrosse has annually presented the Peter Cohn Service Award at LaxCon, honoring one of the most beloved and unique figures in the lacrosse world today. Unfortunately, due to the COVID situation our nation is facing currently, LaxCon took place virtually this year. But today we are honored to present the Fellowship of Christian Athletes Peter Cohn Service Award. Peter was a 5-time equipment manager for the men's U.S. national team between 1978 and 1994. He worked 22 years as an equipment manager for the Middlebury College lacrosse team and was elected into the U.S. Lacrosse Hall of Fame in 2004. Peter was also well known throughout the lacrosse community for the many summer camps he worked and the way he worked and served at those camps, including many of our FCA lacrosse camps. Peter was always the first one onto the field and the last one to leave the field, and only after he found every last ball and picked up every last piece of trash. Every day, Peter modeled and lived the scripture that says, "Greater love has no one than this, that he or she lay down their life for their friends." Peter laid down his life every day for those he served. Peter went to be with the Lord in 2009, but he left behind a lasting legacy for forever. Ladies and gentlemen, fans of the lacrosse world, please help me recognize this year's Peter Cohn Service Award winner, Mr. Greg Bice.
Thank you to FCA Lacrosse, Ryan and Drew, for giving me the 2021 Peter Cohn Award. It is an award that means a lot to me, and I feel humbled and not the most deserving, to be honest. There's so many people out there in the great sport of lacrosse that are doing some great things, and I never got to meet Peter. I know Brad Corrigan very well through Lacrosse the Nations, and Brad was a recipient of this award in 2010. And so I've heard a lot about Peter, and his service to the game obviously goes above and beyond, and just a great guy from all the stories that I've heard. And so I'm humbled and honored to receive this award, and I just want to say thank you to FCA Lacrosse and all those who nominated me. Appreciate you. My name is Greg Bice. I'm from San Antonio, Texas. I went to St. Mary's Hall High School. I played and attended college at The Ohio State University. I was fortunate enough to play professional lacrosse for 10 seasons. And my walk with Christ is not your typical story, I would think. I didn't grow up in the church. We dabbled. We went on Christmas and Easter and maybe a few times in between, but faith was not a major part of my life. And when I went to college at The Ohio State University, a great institution, I had great coaches, obviously great teammates. But for me, I fell into the typical college lifestyle. I was partying quite a bit, and I just got swept up in what everybody else was doing. I didn't really stop and think about how I was living my life and the decisions that I was making. During that time, I was fortunate enough to meet my wife, Emily, and she also was not living the most upstanding lifestyle, but we got engaged. We stayed together through college. We got engaged because for me, I thought that was just the next step that you did with a girlfriend, is that you went towards marriage, not really thinking about the ramifications of marriage or what marriage meant. And during that time, my wife, Emily, went back home and she rediscovered her faith. She had grown up in the church, and she started to have these changes. And for me, I didn't know what was going on. It was it was just different, to be honest. And I had so many questions. And then during that time, I really started to explore my faith. And part of us getting married was that we needed to do premarital counseling. And so we started to go to these premarital counseling sessions with Ross Carter down in North Carolina at Sunrise United Methodist Church. And I would go into these premarital counseling sessions with a chip on my shoulder and ask a ton of questions, and questions that were meant to be really hard to answer, to try and confuse and try and basically prove that there's all of these different ways to think about religion and faith, and there's not one true way. And anyways, through that process, I got disarmed pretty quick, and I started to read. And I started to read a lot of books about Christianity, about faith. Is it true? Is Jesus who he said he was? And leading up to our wedding, I mentally, in my mind, got behind Jesus and said, this guy really was who he said he was. And the historical accounts of the Gospels are true, and I can buy into this, and I can believe this. And for me, though, my wife and I, we did get married, and I believe that I was a follower of Jesus, but a lot of the decisions that I was making, I still rationalized. And the way that I think about it is my head and my heart didn't really connect yet. In my mind, I had made up my mind that Jesus was Lord. In my heart, I don't think I had let him fully penetrate and change who I was fundamentally. My wife and I did a short-term mission trip to Cohn, Honduras, where we worked with the Boys and Girls Orphanage. And during that time, we spent 9 days over Christmas in 2005. And for me, it was the most impactful week of my life, and I was absolutely crushed by the Spirit. At the end of that trip, we had gone to this waterfall, this major waterfall, and this wouldn't be legal in the United States. You end up getting a tour guide and you go behind this massive waterfall, and I found myself alone in this moment, and I felt God speak to me, and God was just saying, Greg, are you in or you out? And it was there in that moment that I decided that I was going to give my life to Jesus, whatever that meant. And so at the end of that trip, I didn't tell my wife about that at the time. We had gotten in the car, we're driving home from the airport, and Stand By Me came on, and I just started crying. And I looked over, my wife was crying too. And I said, Emily, we have to move to Honduras. And she said, I know. And that was it. That was all we talked about it. And then I obviously told her about the moment I had in the waterfall. And from there, we were working, we had jobs. Obviously, I was playing professional lacrosse at that time. And we sold the house, sold the cars, quit our jobs, and we moved down. And we lived and worked in Honduras at a Christian bilingual school. I was teaching math and physics. My wife was teaching English. And then we worked with that same orphanage for a couple of years. And we moved back. We moved back in 2009. We were there from 2007 to 2009. And for me, I don't have the typical come to Christ, grow up in the church. And I thank God for the way that he works and reaching out to me. And I think he reaches out to everybody. And I just am so thankful that my wife was in my life and helped me discover Jesus. And now I'm trying to live my life in a way that God wants me to live. And I know that I still fall short. I still am a sinner, and I still need Jesus. And thank God for the grace that is Jesus Christ. And and I think one of the things that I've learned through becoming a follower of Jesus is that just because you follow Jesus, it doesn't mean your life's going to be easy. My wife and I, when we returned to the United States, we lost 4 children due to preterm pregnancy. And for us, was one of the darkest times of our lives. And, for anybody that's lost children, my heart breaks for you. And, the way that I've heard it described is there's a hole in your heart always. And sometimes it's big and sometimes it's small, but it's always there. And, I think about the hope that we have in Jesus, that I know that I'm going to be reunited with my sons. And I pray that hope for everybody. And I just, I don't know how my wife and I could have gotten through those darkest times without Jesus. And I genuinely pray for everybody that doesn't know Jesus, that, they would at least take a moment to think about, read the Bible, read some books like I did, and just really see what it's about. because, for me, I have hope. I have hope. My wife has hope, that we're going to be reunited with our children one day. And, I just pray that for everybody. And so that's a little bit of my story and where I find myself today. And, I know we have 4 children now. The Lord has blessed us. And, there were times where we didn't think we'd have a family here on this earth, that we weren't going to get to have any kids until we got to heaven. And so for us, it's been a struggle of ups and downs through this life. And I know that it's like that for everybody. We all have these great moments and these difficult moments. I mean, we're all human and we're all going to struggle. And, the one thing that remains true is God. I was fortunate enough to play lacrosse professionally for 10 seasons. And obviously during that time is when I came to faith. And one of the interesting things for me about playing lacrosse and having lacrosse in my life is when I first started playing lacrosse, it was during a difficult time for me. My parents had been divorced. When I was 8, I was entering high school. I had a coach that was just an awesome guy and got me playing lacrosse, and lacrosse became an outlet for me. It became my identity. It became something that I was good at, that I could get praise for, and it was something that I enjoyed. And when I came to Christ, everything kind of changed and got backwards to a certain extent, where for me, I became a follower of Christ who happened to also be a lacrosse player. And so the way that I looked at lacrosse became different, whereas when I first started playing, it was my entire identity. And then when I became a follower of Jesus, it was just something that I happened to do, and something that God had given me a talent in something that I could glorify Him when I played. I really felt that, that I was blessed to a certain degree with certain athletic abilities that I was able to glorify God with. We all have different talents that God gives us. God gives us different purposes, and trying to be able to fulfill those to the best of our ability. And so lacrosse took on a completely different meaning for me once I became a follower of Jesus, and it became something that I did not because it was who I was, but I did it because of the talents and the blessings, and it was a way for me to glorify God. When my wife Emily and I were living in Honduras in 2008, Brett Hughes, a teammate, good friend of mine, gave me a call and said, "Hey, we're going to bring lacrosse to this trash dump community in Nicaragua, Managua, Nicaragua. Are you interested in going?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." And why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I be? And so my wife and I jumped on a bus. We headed down to Managua, Nicaragua, where I met Brad Corrigan for the first time. So Brad and Brett had this vision. Brad had been doing some work with this community, La Chureca, and it really tough. It's honestly, it's hard to describe unless you've been there. And it's changed a little bit. It's now a recycling center, but at that time, to see kids growing up literally in a trash dump it's heartbreaking. And in this community, there was a health clinic, a school, and anyway, so we brought lacrosse. We didn't know what it was going to be, but we brought lacrosse and we started playing with the kids, and it turned out to be this blessing for the kids. It was a blessing for us, obviously, and a way for us to connect. And out of that grew Lacrosse the Nations. Lacrosse the Nations is a nonprofit organization that uses lacrosse to bring hope to communities in need. And for us, it's grown now to we have 2 programs in Nicaragua. We have a program in Panama, a program in Colombia, there's a program in Charlottesville. But that first trip of us just bringing lacrosse to this community, a sport that no one had ever seen before. And for a lot of us, we didn't speak Spanish, didn't communicate. I was fortunate that I spoke a little bit, but just a way, it's amazing to see what a sport can do, and the way that it can break down boundaries and break down walls and give you a way to communicate. And so through that, Lacrosse the Nations is an organization that I've been part of since day one. and an organization that does amazing work. And now we have after-school programs, we have nutrition programs, scholarship programs to help kids go to school. And it all started from that first trip and the idea that Brett and Brad had. That was simply, let's just bring lacrosse in and see what happens. I've had the privilege of being involved with FCA lacrosse since 2010, and I've been fortunate enough to coach some of the national teams in Placid, in Vail, and I think the thing that I look back on and it's been most impactful to me is obviously these teams are very good. Most of these kids end up playing high-level college lacrosse where you can see them. I get to watch them when they go to college and they play in college, which has been great, but just being able to connect with kids who are in a very crucial time in their life where they're going from high school to college. Most of them are going to be away for the first time and on their own. I look back, for me, that was a very, I don't want to say difficult time, but it was a time that I made a lot of poor decisions. And so I look back at all the times that all the players that I've gotten to coach, I hope in some way that I've impacted them in a positive way, that as they go to college, hopefully they avoid some of the mistakes that I made along the way. And building those relationships with those kids has been, and the staff, working with the staff and meeting the other FCA coaches, that's what it's been the most impactful for me. And so when I see guys who are playing in college on Saturdays, that's a cool experience. And I think bigger picture, I just pray for them and hope that FCA lacrosse and me in that time that we spent with them, on these national teams and coaching, that it helped set them up for a positive college experience and helped them think about bigger questions and life's questions prior to entering college, and not get to college much like I did and not really have a strong foundation and not have thought about the life's bigger questions prior to entering a time of your life where you are on your own and you have a lot of freedom. And so for me, that's been the most impactful part of me of coaching with FCA, is just building relationships with the players and the coaches.